Hello and welcome back to the Single Today podcast. This is episode 21. It's called The Toughest Part About Being Single. There are a lot of struggles that come with singleness. Today, I want to talk about what I believe is by far the hardest, most difficult part. But before we get there, real quick, March 15th, the next Single Today conference is happening in Southern California, the Crossing Church, 8:30 a.m. until 12:30. We're going to be talking about singleness, getting together. We've got a lot of new content to share. I cannot wait. You've got to sign up so that you have a spot. There's still some spots left. So there is a link in the show notes if you'd like to sign up for that. Would love to hang out with you on March 15th at the Crossing Church in Costa Mesa, California. Now, this episode began in my mind last week. I've been writing it for a couple of days, and it was based off a question that a friend of mine asked me. So I have been in a small group for the last 17 years with a group of guys. We started the group in college, and we never stopped. And so once a year we meet together somewhere in the world and spend about 3 to 4 days checking in and having fun and talking about our years and encouraging each other and challenging each other and pushing each other forward. And we got together this past week for an unfortunate reason. One of the guys in the group, it was for a celebration of life for our good friend John. And it was really sad and it was tragic and there were a lot of tears, but there was also a really sweet time for us to spend a day together, checking in and telling each other about our years. And as I was giving my check-in, they asked me, they said, "Hey, what is the toughest part about being single?" And in the back of my mind, I thought that would be a really good Single Today podcast. And so here we are, because it's a good question to wrestle with. Out of all the struggles of being single, what is number one for you? Some people would say rejection, of course, right? Like whether it's explicit heartbreak or like implicit rejection, as in like you keep wanting the date, but the date never comes. Or maybe for you, you shot your shot and it didn't go well. Or maybe you just got your heart broken after a long relationship. Whatever it is, rejection can be really, really difficult for single people. But I don't think rejection is the toughest part about being single. Other people may say morality and purity and following the way of Jesus as a single person. And that can be really challenging. And we've talked a lot about that over the last year, but I don't think that's the most difficult part either. Some people will say loneliness, and that's real. And that's certainly on the list. Loneliness is an absolute epidemic. Absolutely. But I think there is one thing that's even more difficult, even more challenging than all of those things. I think the toughest part about being single is time. See, because you can heal from rejection. You can get better at morality. There are other solutions to loneliness, but time never stops moving forward. And apparently it picks up speed as it goes. Has anyone else noticed this? That like every year it seems to go a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster. Even when the days are long, the years just seem to speed up. Like we're getting ready for Easter again, and I'm prepping like Easter sermons, and it feels like Easter was literally last month. I don't know where this past year has gone, but time just keeps moving faster and faster and faster. And when you're single, it's true about everybody that time moving forward is difficult, but there's this added pressure when you're single, right? There's this shot clock where you feel like you are running out of time constantly. When you watch a basketball team, like when you watch the NBA, they have a shot clock that's counting down. And so every possession is always limited, and every single possession, they have to like hurry up and find a good shot, or else it's going to be a turnover. Well, the same thing is kind of true, or seemingly true, when you're single. You always feel like there's like this shot clock in heaven, like God's counting down like 5, 4, 3, and it's like, well, all of my friends are in relationships, or all of my friends are getting married, or all of my friends are having kids, or all of my friends' kids are starting to grow up, and you start to feel like you are running out of time. Time is an incredibly difficult, challenging part of being single, because it feels like it never goes away, because, well, it just keeps moving forward. It's true, right? And so the question is, what do we do? Well, what do we do as single people, realizing that time is going to be one of those things where it's not really like a solution to solve, it's more of a tension to manage. How can we learn to still live a full, abundant life, knowing that we live in a world where we are getting older and where time is at some level running out? I think there are lots of answers to that question that the world throws out. I think there's really only two solutions. And these are the two solutions that I write a little bit about in Single Today and have thought about at length since. Two solutions that are seemingly complete opposites at first, but when we dive into these in just a second, we're going to see that they're actually two sides to the same coin, and that when we can hold the tension between these two truths, we can actually learn to thrive right here, right now, today. We can learn how to be single today, just like the podcast and the book are called Single Today. And so here are the two solutions for me. Anytime I start to feel like I am running out of time, I think this is the prescription. You ready? Number one, an eternal perspective. And number two, radical awareness of this present moment. I'm going to say that again. Number one, an eternal perspective. And number two, a radical awareness of this present moment. See, the two feel like opposites, right? And then when you start to unpack it, you start to realize they're actually not opposites at all. The two work together. The two are like dance partners. And when you miss one side of the coin, it starts to unravel. Okay, I'll personalize this. When I miss one side of this coin, it starts to unravel and fall apart. And that's where the panic sets in, and the wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like you're running out of time starts to set in. And so think about it. An eternal perspective and a radical awareness of this present moment have to work together. Some people have the eternal perspective down, and that's great. But then they get so caught up in the eternal perspective, right, that this isn't the end of the story and that we get to live for all of eternity. And they're so future focused that they miss out on today. It's like they're so caught up in tomorrow that they're of little use today. And they spend their day, or they spend very little time like enjoying their day today and being grateful for what they have right in front of them today. But then other people are so good at accepting today, and then they forget that this isn't the end of the story. And so as good as they are at being present today and accepting today, it's like at some level, they feel like this is all that they have. And so they end up putting way too much pressure on every single moment and every single day. And it's like every event has to be perfect, and every dinner has to just be the best. And if things fall apart, they feel like everything falls apart, right? Because they've got the today part down, but they've lost the eternal perspective. But if you can learn to combine the two will actually act like guardrails on the road of the journey of life. Or maybe like bumpers. I'm just mixing metaphors here. Go with me. Like bumpers in when you're bowling, that you have a bumper on either side that keeps you from getting a gutter ball. I kind of like that. I guess the first one would be keeps you from falling off of a cliff. So the stakes are a little bit higher. Let's go. You know what? Let's go with the first one. They're guardrails that keep you on the right path as you journey through life. And so let's take just 2 minutes here. It's going to take longer than 2 minutes. Let's be real. Let's take a couple of minutes and break down both sides real quick. An eternal perspective and a radical awareness of this present moment. First, an eternal perspective. I am a firm believer that Revelation 21 verses 1 through 5 is one of those passages that you could read every single day. And so before we go any further, let me just start by reading Revelation 21. If you're new to the Bible, Revelation is the very last book. There's 22 chapters, so we're at the tail end of the entire Bible, and this is a picture of what's coming for us in the future. Then I saw a new heaven. Picture this. Use the imagination God gave you to actually picture this right where you are. Man, especially if you are single, and especially if you are struggling to be single today, listen to this good news. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. Notice the wedding imagery. The end of the story is a wedding celebration. So weddings, this side of eternity, are great and they are amazing. They are also a picture of the ultimate wedding that is to come, heaven and earth together at last. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them." I think about John 1, when John is opening his gospel and he says that the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So while Jesus was on this earth for 33 years, it's like God was dwelling. It's not like God was dwelling with us. And the picture that we get at the end of all of this is that that is happening in its completion. So just like some scholars say that Jesus was a walking wedding celebration of heaven meeting earth, which is why demons were cast out and blind eyes were opened and relationships were restored and people were forgiven of their sins and set free. That is the picture of that happening in its entirety, is the picture of the end of this. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Tears are real and grief is real, but it's not permanent. There's coming a day where he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. There will be no more death or mourning, crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Such a beautiful picture of where all of this is heading. So in light of all of the challenges you're facing today, those challenges are real. Hey, especially when it comes to being single, the challenges that we're facing are real. The loneliness we're facing is real. The worry that we're running out of time is real to an extent. The problem is, not the problem, the solution is to realize that although we feel like we are running out of time, we actually have an infinite amount of it. We actually get to live for all of eternity. So although there is some semblance of a shot clock this side of eternity, on the other side, we get to keep going and we get to keep living and we get to keep celebrating and we get to keep being together. And so that, my single friends, is really, really good news for us. It doesn't fix everything, but if you can start by having that eternal perspective, it does start to make today a lot easier. I think about the C.S. Lewis quote: "If you read history, you will find that Christians who did the most for the present world were precisely those who thought most of the next." So Lewis says, who did the most here? Oh, it was the ones who had the eternal perspective, who thought the most about the next. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think, Lewis continues to say, of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. So Lewis, this was several decades ago, goes, hey, because we've stopped thinking so much about the next, we've lost a lot of our efficiency and effectiveness in this world. C.S. Lewis is saying, hey, if you want to be effective today, you got to learn how to have an eternal perspective. And single people, my goodness, we need to get this. Time is a resource, but we actually have an unlimited amount of it. And so single person, when you start to feel the shot clock winding down, 5, 4, 3, when another year comes by and it just seems like time is picking up speed, 5, 4, 3, you stop and you remind yourself that we actually have an unlimited amount of time, that we have an eternal perspective. Now, that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is a radical awareness of today. So Jesus understood the first side. He understood where all of this was heading, but he also was really good at saying things like, don't worry about tomorrow. He was also really good at reminding people not to worry about tomorrow, but to be present today. He'd say things like, look at the birds, look at the flowers, look at things like help yourself be grounded in this present moment and realize that what is happening right here, right now, right in front of you as you listen to episode 21 of the Single Today podcast. Like, this is what's real. This is what's real. And it's so hard. Let's just be real. It's so hard as single people to be present in this moment. That's like the whole Single Today journey of like, these are the questions that really started this book journey for me, because it's so difficult to not overthink mistakes from the past, but also not worry about the future, not worry about tomorrow. Jesus calls us to have a radical awareness of today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Let's be real, single people. That's really hard. Especially when your friends start to get into relationships. You start to feel like you're falling behind. Or especially when your friends start to get engaged, you feel like you're falling behind. And then you start standing up there for all of these weddings and you celebrate them, but at some level you feel like you're falling behind. Then they get pregnant and you feel like you're falling behind. And then they have their kids and you feel like you're falling behind. And then their kids start to grow up and you feel like you're falling behind all the more. The eternal perspective is important, and that's great. And if you don't also pair that with a radical awareness of just being present today in the moment, then in this moment, you're going to continue to feel like you are running out of time. Jesus, on the other hand, says things like, hey, just lay down your life and lose your life and you will find it. Says things like, if you want to be great, just start serving people. How about that, single people? Yeah. If you are worried about the future and feel like you're running behind, who's one person that you could serve today? Who's one person? By serve, I just mean encourage or go love or bake something and go bring it to them. How about this? Let's write more notes to each other and send notes, mail. Let's send snail mail to one another, encouraging one another. Or write a nice letter and send it out to them. Send them a text message. Spend some time just stopping and praying for somebody, and then text them and let them know, hey, I'm praying for you today. I love you. I'm in your corner. Find somebody to encourage today, because Jesus says if you want to be great, you got to learn how to serve. Thinking about other people and loving other people is one of the amazing ways of radically accepting that today is where the party's at. The future is going to be great, and the eternal future is going to be tremendous, but today we are right here. And today, it's like Paul says, remember when Paul says, well, to die is gain, but to live is Christ. I reverse that, but you're with me. To live is Christ, to die is gain. One day in eternity, that's going to be great, but to live is Christ. Paul was writing, but today, like, here I am. And so I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep loving. I'm going to keep serving. Amazing that someone who was single like Paul could write something so profound, isn't it? Paul understood that today was where the party was at. And so he goes on to write, it's in Philippians 1, like, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to keep working until my number is called. And so, single people, how do you get that second side of the coin? How do you get that radical awareness of today? My favorite is to memorize Psalm 118, verse 24. Carry it around with you. Repeat it like ad nauseum throughout your day. Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day. Doesn't say tomorrow's the day. Doesn't say 3 months ago is the day. That was true about those days, or will be true about those days. But today, whenever you are listening to this podcast, this is the day the Lord has made. And so the psalmist says, we will rejoice and be glad in it. I love how like resolute the psalmist is. Doesn't say we might rejoice. Doesn't say if we get around to it, if we have enough time, we'll stop and rejoice for a little bit. No, the psalmist writes, we will rejoice and be glad in it. I want to challenge you to memorize that psalm. I'm going to say it one more time and see if you can internalize it. Seriously, our brains, our minds are becoming less and less um, capable of memorizing things. Like, remember how we used to, if you're old enough, you used to memorize phone numbers, or you used to memorize how to get to a certain place. Now our phones do it all for us. And although there's some beauty to that, there's also a burden that we are getting worse at memorizing. I think memorizing scripture is the perfect way to combat that. So take a moment and memorize Psalm 118, verse 24. You read it one more time. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Now, two sides to the same coin. And again, you got to get both. You got to be able to hold the two in tension together, because hopefully you're starting to see by now they're actually not opposites. They're dance partners. The only two solutions is to have an eternal perspective and a radical awareness of this present moment. Both can be true at the same time, that we get to live forever and that we are here today, and that the people right in front of us today are what really matter. And so a radical awareness, an eternal perspective and a radical awareness of this present moment. When you drop one, when I drop one, I start to worry so much that I'm running out of time. But anytime I'm starting to feel that concern, I'm starting to feel that worry, these are the two things that I hold. And so back to the story of last week, they asked me to say, hey, what's the most difficult part of being single? Because they're all married, they all have kids, they all are crushing life and doing their thing. And so my check-in always looks a lot different than theirs. They asked me, what's the most difficult part? And as I thought about it, it became just very clear in my mind, as clear as day. It's time. Time and always feeling like you're running out of it is the most challenging part of being single. It's a part of the journey, but it doesn't have to call the shots. We can be aware of it. We can let it tap us on the shoulder and remind us to stay active and to continue to pursue life with passion, because life is short and our days are numbered, but we don't have to let it call the shots. And the best way to put it in the back seat and tell it to be quiet is to remember these two things. Now, I've got an eternal perspective, and so I'm actually filthy rich with time. And number two, I've got today, and I've got a radical awareness that I am present today, that I'm still alive today, that I still have breath in my lungs right here and right now. And so wherever this episode 21 finds you, if you resonate at all with feeling like you're running out of time, may you move into a deep awareness in this moment that this is not the end of the story, that we actually have an abundance of time, an infinite amount of time on our hands, that we get to live forever on one hand, and on the other, may you have a radical awareness of this present moment, that today is sacred, that today is special, that the conversation you are having today matters, that the meeting you have today matters, that the adventure that you are going on today matters, because today is the day that the Lord has made. And so together, let's rejoice and let's be glad in it.